sometimes you need to do stuff without asking for permission.
Pharma has never invested more in AI, but who actually owns the outcome? This week on Off-Label, transformation leaders Alyssa Fenoglio and Dr. Michael Kurr join me for a Top Gun-inspired deep dive into AI, accountability, operating models, and why Pharma may be heading into, you guessed it, the danger zone.
No one is really flying the plane.
Because if nobody's clearly flying the plane, well, you're not scaling. You ready to go? Let's buzz the tower, Goose. Yes, welcome to the Off-Label podcast once again. This time we've got a Top Gun theme, and when I introduce the next two guests, it really does lean on the original Top Gun theme of the best of the best. I'd like to introduce Michael Kurr, Dr. Michael Kurr rather, and Alyssa Fenoglio. How are you both going today?
Hey, Steve. How are you, Michael?
Really well. Welcome to the chat. We've got you in the Top Gun gear, and for those who are listening and not watching, we've got aviators, bomber jackets, collars uplifted. I'm the one actually letting the side down, and it's my podcast. I am traveling. Lame excuse, I know. But we've got the sunnies on. We're ready to rock and roll. Having a little bit of fun, but we've got a really, really serious topic to talk about. So what we're going to do is jump straight into it and without any further ado. So Top Gun, geez, such a good movie. But anyway, before we start reminiscing too much, the tech in the movie, it was incredible, next level. But at the end of the day, there was someone in the cockpit. Mav, Iceman, you name it. And they were the ones that were accountable for the outcome. So in Pharma right now, we've got more AI investment and things going on than ever before. But, I'm not sure if we know who's flying the plane. So let's start on that one, guys. How did we end up with more capability than ever at this point in time, but less clarity on the ownership? Does anyone want to have a stab at that?
Alyssa?
Well, I think we followed kind of the same approach that we took for digital transformation, which was a tech-first approach. So building all of these technology tools and new capabilities internally for AI as well. But then there wasn't a plan in place. There wasn't a flight plan to actually land it in the organization. And we're following the same pattern with AI. And I think no one is really flying the plane. I think there's a lot of individuals flying different flight routes, but they're not necessarily coordinated.
Yeah,
I
totally agree to that. Let me build a couple of points here. What I'm observing is that, to your point, Steve, the capabilities, the horsepower of what can be done technologically has clearly outpaced the way organizations can evolve and transform. Yeah, especially large structures are simply not able to keep up with the pace of what would be required to fully embrace what is possible from a technical standpoint. Most of it, because it's very uncomfortable to change the operating model, to change decision authorities, to change the process and all the rest of it. So there is a growing gap, and I'm a little concerned that AI is going to amplify all the weaknesses that we were not fixing over the last couple of years when it comes to our way of operating.
I think you're right to be concerned. It certainly could expose some pretty serious shortcomings that we kind of just gloss over so easily in our everlasting pursuit of KPIs and our own personal goals and things like that. So, there's a lot going on. And when I say we kind of gloss over it, I think there's a lot of excitement in the industry about the progress that we are having with all this new technology. Do you think maybe it's a little bit myopic or short-sighted, and are we mistaking the activity for progress? And it's not really progress.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this is what we were doing with digital transformation. I think if you look at the actual impact on the business, it was very limited because we were measuring the wrong things. And it's not fully integrated into supporting strategic business objectives and the P&L, ultimately connecting somehow to increasing revenue or saving money or improving patient outcomes. And that has to be the direction we're headed with any sort of capability builds, any sort of technology. It needs to be connected back to the business and woven into the business, which I think was what Michael was saying. It's just kind of sitting separate, floating separately, and it's not integrated into it. And so absolutely, I think we're measuring things that don't matter, number of licenses, number of logins, things that actually don't move the business, change behavior or anything meaningful. And I think part of it is there is no playbook for this, right? So as the world evolves, as new technology comes out and things change so quickly, early adapters are figuring it out, but there isn't a playbook that any CEO or CGO or anyone can follow. So we have to lead without the answers.
And I guess when you are attending all these conferences and reading these white papers and so on, there's a lot of good stuff out there. I don't disagree with that. A lot of shiny projects that look and sound impressive. In the end, it comes all back to scalability, right? So it's one thing to have these projects here and there that stand out and that make up for a good story and narrative. However, make something being effective at scale across the entire organization is a very different story. And maybe let's add some data here also. Not only in pharma, but overall, we get used to a transformation failure rate of about 60 to 70%. And that number hasn't changed an inch over the last probably decade, right? So that's something we accepted already. When it comes to AI now, great news is that the adoption is really skyrocketing. 60 to 80% of all the companies start to embrace AI and adopt it. But I guess just earlier this year, the latest MIT research unveiled that a staggering amount of 95% of all AI initiatives don't meet the expected business outcomes. Yeah? So we are really not solving for anything here. What we are actually risking to do is that we are scaling the problem that was there before, but that is now getting accelerated through AI.
It's quite sobering. I mean, you talk about going to these conferences before the AI really started to take wing. There was so many discussions around pilots and how we just did them for the sake of them and they never hit the goals. And even if they did, you'd just forget about them because it wasn't measurable. Nobody was accountable and it just kind of got swept under the rug until the next thing came up. There seems to be a lack of focus in the cockpit, so to speak, on where is the mission objective and how are we going to get there together and how is it going to be measured properly. I really like what you said, Alyssa, just about all these measuring things that don't matter. The amount of dashboards that you see from all different solution, internal and external providers. And what does it all mean? I think people are just don't know what metrics to focus on, perhaps. But let's talk. I just mentioned the cockpit word. I think Alyssa, I don't think I'm going to match you for your analogies. You spun about 6 Top Gun analogies into your first answer. I think we're going to call you the winner straight away for the Top Gun episode. But let's talk about the pilot in the cockpit. And when I say that, I mean let's talk about who owns the flight. You know, the modern pharma systems, Michael, you just mentioned that 95% are starting to do things, although a frightening amount aren't hitting the mark. Sorry, I think I've misquoted you then. 80% are starting to lean on AI technology and systems and processes. Where I'm going with it is they're starting to fly themselves with AI automation and workflows. But in a plane, autopilot doesn't remove accountability. Actual fact, it probably sharpens it. So the question here is, who is actually orchestrating AI across pharma today? And if there isn't an answer to that, who should it be?
Well, I think that it's 2 different realities, right? I don't think who should it be is matching what we're actually observing. And it's not just a pharma issue. We are seeing this across industries. Like everyone is struggling with this and trying to build the plane and fly it at the same time because there is no playbook, there is no flight plan. But I think in the case of most of the pharma organizations, what I observe is it usually sits under the CIO or the CTO. It's considered a technology exercise. We also see that outside the industry. But the challenge with that is it's really a cross-functional exercise, right? Because we're trying to drive the business, which sits with the business functions, also with HR, especially with agents coming into play, right? And so what did the future of teams look like with agents and humans working together and performing together? I think best practice is a cross-functional council that rotates ownership and decision-making rights across functions. So it's not just the CIO or the CGO or the head of R&D or HR, it's rotating. And within the piece that each function owns, there's an accountability for what they own as part of the broader enterprise AI program. So everyone has a piece that they own that ladders up to the bigger picture of everything connecting to the business strategy, top agenda, and, driving the business from a P&L perspective. Now, that's not happening in most organizations. What I hear a lot of is there may be an AI council. I'm sorry?
Yeah, just leading into that. What is happening? What you're seeing? Where are the problems?
So in most companies, there is some sort of council set up. Typically, the council is led by the CIO or CTO, but then it dissipates from there. So if you ask anyone in the business, let's say you ask, a GM of a country or a head of marketing for a brand, they likely can't name the people on that council, nor is the cascade making it through the organization to direct the plane and the broader organization on the flight plan. And so what you see is in the absence of that, lots of sub councils being popped up, whether it's a functional sub council of AI, a brand council, a country council, and then the separate pilots are bubbling up from different parts of the business because the top down is getting stuck. It's not actually making it through the business in a meaningful way. And, one example that I've seen in our industry is Moderna. They actually combined HR with IT and digital into one function. And the CHRO is leading that new function. And they're looking at the integration of technology, humans, and agents. And that's quite a bold approach and something for us to take a look at how it works.
Look, for your perspective on it. Is my first reaction to that was, is that a benefit of maybe some of the smaller, more agile companies opposed to the traditional top 20 pharma companies, and maybe a little bit with too much hierarchy and layers and things like that to be able to lean on that sort of bold thinking and approach?
It's a fair point, right? Moderna is not one of the larger pharma companies, but it doesn't mean we can't look at insights and ideas coming from outside the industry or smaller, more agile companies to see how could we make this happen, let's say in the most impactful function of a large pharma company, or try to test out some of these ideas. Because otherwise what we continue to see, and Michael, feel free to jump in, is we're just iterating on the old legacy workflows, processes, everything we've done. It's refining and iterating. No one's doing anything game changing, thinking about it from the ground up, like reimagining what this could look like in a new, fresh way.
And I guess that really hits the nail on the head, because as I mentioned earlier, it's uncomfortable to look at the governance of who is deciding what, who is owning what, and to change that. Because changing that always means taking something away from somebody. And that's the hard part, right? While some others might gain, many others will have to lose. And especially also coming back to the concept of scalability. Scalability normally has to do with more centralized governance to make sure that downstream things fall in line, that the corporate makes sure that the regions and the markets are aligned, that incentives are aligned. So you cannot have these decentralized authorities all over the place that ultimately, with their own budgets, decide their own tech stack, design their own operating model, which over time will become increasingly disconnected from the corporate center and the rest of the organization. Naturally, to keep this together will require a stronger top-down governance. This is how I see it, and that's the uncomfortable truth that most people don't want to hear, especially when you're sitting in a market. Probably that's the least you want to hear. But otherwise, it happens exactly as Alyssa mentioned, specifically in large structures. You see all these committees popping up where no one is owning anything because everybody is owning everything, kind of. So I'm getting nervous when I'm hearing this committee thing. In the end, I believe we need to keep that simple. Specifically with AI, we need to think through the process end to end and who is the main beneficiary of the improved outcome of something that cuts across functions, that cuts across the organization, which is in the nature of AI and other technology. And this one person needs to be accountable for the outcome. This one person needs to be held accountable also to use the technology, to use the AI to create these outcomes that are expected. In large organization, of course, this is not the whole solution, I guess. You need to have an orchestrating layer. You need to maintain that visibility of what is going on. That's absolutely important, but that's more around creating that transparency, making sure that interests are kind of falling in line. But on the initiative level, there need to be somebody who owns the head and who's held accountable for the outcome. Otherwise, this is not going to happen, and this is also not going to scale.
Yeah, that resonates really strongly, and it probably leads us. It's a nice little segue into the next question and section, actually. Now that I think about it, so we're saying no one's clearly flying. There's far too many co-pilots. There's no one at the top driving the plane. So let's talk about why that's happening maybe a little bit. Now, everyone's talking about AI like it's a technology race, and certainly in some industries it absolutely is. But from what I'm hearing from both of you with regards to our industry that we love so much, it's the technology isn't where the problem is. So, I mean, you've probably kind of answered this in a way, but are we spending too much time overbuilding tools and capabilities and underbuilding how we need to operate? And where does transformation actually break the decision-making and governance roles? Let's really lean into this transformation piece, because I'm very interested to see where you think it needs to, what needs to happen right now, what your advice would be to a CEO tomorrow to get this right. But what's the danger if the industry doesn't find a way to get this, to deliver this effectively? I get the feeling we're at a bit of a timeline. There's not a lot of time to get this right. Or there could be other players, other operators, other methods and things like that could make life tricky.
My perspective, I think back to the stats that Michael mentioned at the beginning, most transformations fail. And I don't think that stat is just an AI transformation failing. I think a lot of transformations fail. I think what we typically see is, at the very top, there are words being said externally, internally about AI, about transformation. In reality, our leaders, our executives have many, many transformation topics and many, many challenges hitting the numbers and leading large, significant organizations. And so where does AI actually fall in the prioritization? It varies by organization. A lot of times it's not in the top 1, 2, 3 topics because there's other more urgent short-term things to address. Also, obviously balancing the pipeline. So we see words being said. I think there is good intent, but then it kind of gets lost from there down to, everyone kind of bubbling up from the brand, from the country, from the functional level, their own experimentation led by early adopters, led by the people we should be securing and harnessing as AI champions who naturally are adopting quicker and could partner with the central organization to drive the change in an integrated way. So it's not just top down, but it's a collaborative approach. It's getting stuck in the messy middle. And that's where, in the absence of direction, making it from the top down, everyone invents their own flight plan and starts going that direction. Yep. So yes, we have a lot of technology, but the playbook to actually say how to use it in the right way throughout the organization, looking at how is it wired into the strategy? How is it connected to incomes? How are we designing pilots to scale from the very beginning, right? So looking at things like the data and tech stack from the beginning, it'll tell you if it'll scale. Because if a country has their own data and tech stack, you have to reinvent that at times 200 across the globe to scale, right? And so these are the things that you really need to go more deeply on at the beginning of kicking something off. Also prioritization and connected to strategy. So, I think earlier it was said, we're going too broad. We're not making choices. Exactly. So what you see top organizations, for example, Reckitt's got it wired into their corporate strategy that they're focusing on innovation related to concept development, speed and quality. For them, that's a competitive advantage. So what is it for our industry? What's the competitive advantage we're trying to build? And where can we focus AI in those areas, not everything everywhere, to drive the most meaningful contribution to the business? And then moving down the line, it's obviously wiring it into the workflows, not just iterating the workflow, but looking at what steps should be stopped, what should be added, how do you work with agents, and ultimately then equipping people with the right skills to actually drive the change. So it's unglamorous work. That is why it's getting skipped, because it's not an easy thing to do, as we all know, as transformation
Everyone wants
leaders.
to jump to the cool stuff.
Yeah.
Maybe adding a couple of thoughts that you also mentioned, Steve. Are we building too many things at once instead of focusing on those things that matter, and also thinking about the timeline of what a successful transformation requires? Yeah, there's definitely a disconnect. Also, careers move faster than driving a consistent consistently delivering transformation. Yeah. So this shiny object that makes you the star on the stage probably gets you in the next role already, while scalable, consistent transformation needs some more resilience, needs to see more continuity also to a certain extent. And if you want to really create impact at global scale, scalability is key. And where we also stand in our own way as an industry is we are used to optimize for perfection. We hardly see a concept of good enough, right? And a solution that is just good enough but scalable will always be the best solution possible. And that balance, I feel that we are struggling a little bit. So rather go for something simpler that scales than going for the perfect that sits on an island dying in beauty.
You've raised such a good point, and one that's bothered me for a long time, even just from a very simple, product marketing perspective. A product manager will launch an app, and then they'll get promoted, and then there'll be their replacement who'll say, I don't want to do that anymore because I want to do my own thing. And there's some data that suggests maybe we could try something else. And there's just budget every year to do these new things. There's no strategy in terms of a 3-5 year plan and building a team that their KPI is to deliver over a 3-5 year term, this particular thing. There's far too much individual blinkers and objectives from a career development perspective rather than a team, company, corporate objective perspective. How on earth does that change, though? I mean, this is our industry, and I dare say it's a great many others. But you look at motor cars. The teams get together to build a particular model, and that's their job. They might get promoted, but they're still working on the same sort of model until that model is delivered. There's exceptions to every example, but is this something that Pharma needs to finally find a way to do? Or is there a workaround here? How do we get alignment collectively to really effectively push the change management play?
Well, I think here it's going back to one of the earlier points mentioned, which is AI is magnifying all of our historical legacy problems we never resolved. So I wouldn't say this is just because of AI, but even before, we were seeing functions not reconciling their objectives, their priorities, where they were headed. Even in any cross-functional team, KPIs many times were not clear. And so I think it's just going back to good business rigor and one corporate strategy, then it goes to each function, goes to each geography, but everyone needs to be going the same direction. And AI is just making that magnifying the problem that was never resolved. So how do we fix it? It's good business rigor that should have been instituted in the beginning. It should always be super clear up front. It's discipline. What is the business objective for this cross-functional pilot project, brand team, whatever? What does each function own? What's the RACI model? Again, it's not glamorous, but it is the hard work that needs to be done to actually get this change management going in the right direction.
And probably this example that Alyssa mentioned earlier, bringing together, what was it, HR together with IT and the business, that might be a setup that could create impact on the problem that we just stated in terms of career progression faster than organizational evolution, let alone then technical changes and so on. Yeah. That's certainly one part. The other part is probably we will just wait long enough that the pain is simply getting big enough. The profits are decreasing year on year. The profitability is not coming. And then we are opening up new windows of opportunities for new entries, new competitors, because also the overall thresholds to enter this market are coming down thanks to the tech and the enablement of tech. So we are opening up the competitive space, which, and I'm not cynical here, I mean it, which is probably not a bad thing in the pharma industry that has become a little comfortable. Let's be clear. Yeah, there were decades of success, a lot of money around, well funded, and that was all fine. But competition always takes us to the next level. And maybe as an industry, we are at that inflection point where we need to have this kind of a wake up call to really start taking this industry to the next level. I know I might provoke many people,
No, that's
but
good.
let's be open and clear.
Yeah. There's new, faster, more agile planes out there being built on the horizon, and they could well come into our airspace and cause kick off a dogfight. I think you're right. The inflection point is a great word, and Alyssa, your comments leaned into that as well. That gaps are being exposed more than ever because of these advancements in technology. There's sooner or later there's just going to be such scenarios that you can't ignore, and what has got us here is not going to get us there anymore. So maybe it's a good thing. We'll be pushed into a corner, and if we're to survive, it kind of starts now. So let's move in.
Thing here,
sure,
Steve?
Yes, please.
So one, I agree. I think competition breeds excellence, and so the people who are ready and prepared to adapt and be agile and shape what's next in the industry have a huge opportunity and potential, right? Which is super exciting. And you see a lot of the smaller, more agile biotechs, building in different ways. You even see Bayer, for example. I think they've recently tried to transform in more of a consulting approach with cross-functional teams across the organization versus traditional functional silos. But I think where the dogfight may be, and would love both of your opinions, is with the tech industry now coming into healthcare in different ways and verticalizing from their side of it. And pharma is slower to move. And so that I do see that coming, and that will be quite interesting and may force us to evolve, or the companies who are more agile will be evolved and gain a competitive advantage.
I guess we have a little bit of that we have seen, not directly in the pharma industry, at least in the pharma SaaS part of the industry, right? Where just one little announcement of Anthropic, I believe it was, creating a new functionality in their model made this SaaS industry collapse by 15 billion or overnight or something. I think that's an overreaction, but that gives us an idea of what is going to come our way, because these new entries don't care for our ways of working. They don't care for our speed of transforming stuff. They simply see the market opportunity and they will move aggressively. And this is something we are probably not fully prepared to take yet.
Yeah, it's anything. I mean, anything is on the table at this point. The future is unclear, but the potential is starting to materialize a little bit in some industries, and everything from banking to travel to a range of services, including healthcare, is going to be disrupted. And does it get to a universe where doctors just get all their information and diagnosing from an LLM, and are they able to then prescribe after a recommendation from an LLM? And does that hook into EHRs and all sorts of things? One doesn't know, but pharma needs to have a voice in this conversation because nobody knows it and understands it better. So I think timing is of the essence of this one. It's going to be an interesting and bumpy ride. So on that, let's maybe move into a couple of what we're going to call the afterburner round. So there's going to be some fast-paced, punchy sort of questions here, and we'll lead off with you, Alyssa, on this one. So no fluff, no theory. Let's just make it real. One illusion. Pharma leaders need to stop believing about AI. What would you say today?
I think there's quite a few here, but I do think the number one thing that I see is a lot of fear and inertia caused by the fear. I think that many feel that they're waiting for someone to tell them what to do, and that they can't control the future and they can't actually shape what's next and take advantage of this open window, right? No one has a competitive advantage yet. As individuals, as organizations, it's not like you can name one, probably any of us, who is number one in AI and pharma. I certainly can't. So there is opportunity. The time is now. And I think we need to shift that mindset from, I'm waiting for someone to tell me what to do, or I'm not very tech savvy, to how do I evolve myself to thrive in this next chapter?
Yep. Nice one. Michael, one operating model change that actually could unlock scale. Just one.
Accountability, clear accountability for the business outcome. The one person that wears the hat and runs with it. That's the operating model change that we need to see.
Very good. Alyssa, what's one red flag that tells you transformation is just theatre?
I think if it's completely disconnected from the business, if we're talking about disconnected vanity metrics, but more importantly, it goes back to that 95% stat, 94% stat, whichever article you're looking at. If you cannot connect to the value of the business and substantial returns, then it's completely theater. And it takes a while to get there, but that is the goal, to increase that 5% to 10%, 15, 20, et cetera.
Nice one. And Michael, we've kind of touched on this a little bit, but what is for the Top Gun reference, the danger zone that Pharma could be flying into if we don't do something to change soon?
The danger zone, as you mentioned, we quickly touched on it, that we open up the window of opportunity for too many, too aggressive competitors that are new in the mix, but that have their pockets full of money and start disrupting the industry in a way that we probably don't want to see it being disrupted. Because to your point, we still have all the knowledge, the experience of how to engage with doctors, how to treat patients, and so on. There is a risk that it will take a step back before getting better again.
Indeed. No, top answers there from the best of the best. Let's talk about where there's going to be lots of other hot shots and wingmen and very capable pharma operators, and that's coming up soon in Dubrovnik. I believe you'll both be there at the next Pharma Summit in 2 weeks. Well, they're at 3 weeks maybe. See, it's close. Yeah. Well, wonderful. I mean, I've very much enjoyed both of your involvement in that session before. So we'll just touch on it because I understand you guys are going to be on a panel together. So let's talk about Dubrovnik. It's the next Pharma Summit, one of Europe's biggest, most well-known and credible pharmaceutical industry conferences. I've very much enjoyed attending the last few years and had the opportunity to watch both of you top operators on stage doing your thing. Michael, your transformation circus was a highlight for many. I'm wondering, either of you have any thoughts on what we're in store for this year? What's coming next at Next?
Well, what's coming next and next? Not yet a new version of the Transformation Circus. I was actually working on some new versions and I had a couple of presentations on stage in the meantime where I added AI and the agentic AI movement explicitly as a massive force within this tent of the Transformation Circus. So that might be something for next year or this year Vienna or whatsoever. Let's see. But most curious I will be to hear Alyssa's extended thinking on the human algorithm, and I'm sure he will do awesome on stage. So that will be my highlighter.
Alyssa, you're taking the stage. What are we in store for?
Well,
we never disappoint.
I am waiting for that transformation circus. I know it's not ended. We have not solved that problem, so I'm sure there's another act to be had at some point.
Is there a fishbowl or something at this conference just to jump in? That's the one where people from the audience can come up and jump in. You could hijack a session, Michael, and go, the people need to hear this.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll get the slides sorted
with rupees.
I know the production crew. I can pull some strings for you.
The ringmaster. Well, I think this conference is exciting because everyone attending really wants to drive change. They want to learn. These are early adopters. There's an excitement in the air. I think there's a positivity around how do we share insights in a way that benefits the industry, not, competitive companies against one another. I'm excited to share where the human algorithm has evolved. Last year, we talked about, how do you prepare an organization for people first transformation and the 4 drivers? But the question has changed over the last year with the conversations I've had with leaders, executives across the globe. And now it's, well, how do we make this happen? And it goes back to a lot of what we were just discussing structurally in an organization, from leadership to strategy to operating models to people. How do you make it happen? There is no playbook today. So I'm excited to share the evolution of the human algorithm and how that could rewire the organization. But more importantly, I want to convey the point that we're moving past the era of efficiency. And that's the title of the keynote. Is we've been so focused on cost cutting and short-term goals and hitting numbers and headcount, obviously reductions in the news across industries. AI can do so much more to drive performance. And so we're moving towards an era of reinvention. And so that's what I'm excited to share in Dubrovnik.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear. I'm looking forward to getting over there. And you're right. There is a really exceptional and unique buzz and atmosphere this event. A really serious networking opportunity. Like I don't think I've ever developed so many contacts at an event as what you do at this one. It's just so buzzy. Those 20-minute sessions, one into the other. You're kind of just floating through the day. So yeah, very much looking forward to catching up with you both on the beach. I know I owe you both a drink or something for my misdemeanor in not making the grid at the right time last week. So we'll make amends for that. Right. So we've been on a good mission. Our 3 fighter jets. We've all returned back to the aircraft carrier. So let's finish with a little bit of fun. Now, we can't do, with all of these off-label episodes, when we focus in on a little bit of a movie, we like to finish with a little bit of a bit of an angle. So for this one, what we want to do is, do you have a favorite Top Gun line, moment, or character, and why? Or you could lightning sort of a Hail Mary. It can be a track from the soundtrack. But if it is a track from the soundtrack, you have to sing a verse, right?
We've never done karaoke together. I don't know. My singing voice is not very good. I don't know about the two of you.
I don't believe it for a second. You're good at everything.
I have actually a favorite scene that I want to share with you guys, and I'm sure we all have seen Top Gun 2 also. In our age, by the way, it's adding a whole next level of experience from the version 1 that was, 35, 40 years back, like different life altogether. That in itself made that an experience, right? But in this Top Gun 2 movie, the scene where Maverick drops into this funnel that he need to do in 2 minutes 30. No one was aware. The flight was not announced. He just made it to show his class that it can be done in 2:15, not even in 2:30, right? And the commander was standing there staring, and the camera was moving through this classroom and all these faces and the whole atmosphere. I'm almost getting goosebumps when I'm talking about this. This is my favorite one. And what I want to say, linking it to the transformation, sometimes you need to do stuff without asking for permission. Otherwise, things don't move. And this is a brilliant illustration of that. I love that scene.
I love it. I love the way you've tied it into the topic as well, Michael. You're now Alyssa, scene.
I agree. I mean, one, I love both the movies. I think they're iconic, and it's just one of those you can go back and rewatch. And even though the production quality isn't excellent from the one from the 80s, it's just there's so many powerful messages. In general, I mean, obviously his name is Maverick, so he is a bold change agent in his own right. And I think the scene you just described, Michael, relates to that. There was a quote with regards to one of the admirals, and he was trying to ground Maverick, I think in the first one, and your kind's headed for extinction. And Maverick said, maybe so, sir, but not today. And I think that relates a lot to our industry and the fact that you could go extinct if you don't evolve and change and push the boundaries. We're so used to being told no. I think that's what's quelling innovation, especially in the commercial side of our industry. And you know, again, to the story Michael just shared, Maverick's pushing the boundaries and not just waiting for the yes. Now, there's a balance to that with regards to life and death and crashing a plane, but you've got to find that right balance to be bold enough to push through and evolve. And this is the time.
Absolutely. I'm going to lean into a quote from the second one. It might have been in the first as well. I don't know. But leaning into the conversation about that it's not the technology, it's the person, it's the people. I'm going to go into that. It's not the plane. It's the pilot. And let's hope that Pharma has a lot more pilots coming up through the ranks, not the pilots in the traditional sense of failed marketing initiatives, but pilots that are going to be steering this transformational change with technology moving forward. Michael, Alyssa, thank you so much for joining us. It's been a pleasure.
It was a pleasure talking to you guys. It was a pleasure to see you again, Alyssa and Steve, and looking forward to Dubrovnik, that's for sure.
Likewise.
Yes, can't wait for our reunion. And maybe we can sing there, Steve, in person.
That sounds like a plan. One of those Croatian beers at the VIP party on the night. Anything could happen. Have a good one, guys. Great to catch up.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye. Cheers.